Christmas, Philip.
Happy Christmas, Andrew.
Christmas time. Mistletoe and wine. Children sing in Christian rhyme. Logs on the fire. A poorly wrapped copy of the Virginia Giuffre memoir beneath the tree. Christmas is good, sure, but Advent is a most wonderful time of the year. And here at Multipolarity, we reject secularization. We believe that Advent is the Christmas they can't take from you. Which is why we're introducing the Multipolarity Advent Calendar. Every day, from now until the Noel, we're going to be opening a window a day. Each window contains an object. Each object is a token that represents a part of the geopolitical year gone by. Every day, we'll be sending out a special pod, and as the window opens, you'll hear either Andrew or Philip taking on that topic for about 10 minutes. Like a real Advent calendar, you can open one at a time, like a good boy, or you can go to your room and gorge until you're sick in one greedy burst, finally feeling safe, secure, your thumb working like a jackhammer, ripping through the cardboard indents, tearing off foil clumps, choco-maxing your insulin response to bliss until it feels like mummy can't hurt you anymore. The choice is yours. Please consume responsibly. Today is day 2, so let's open the window and see what's inside. It's a fireworks gun.
This year, 2025, we watched fireworks being shot at the Georgian Parliament building. But I doubt that the fireworks of colour revolutions evoke quite the same audience response anymore. Whether they really work anymore as a means of regime change as they once did. I think that 2025 might mark the year when the potency of colour revolutions ended, and the potency ended or declined quite decisively. So let's have a quick summary of what's happened. Let's keep some scores here, some multipolarity scores. So in Georgia, the long colour revolution, we might call it, continued. There was a demonstration in October 2025, October this year, calling itself the Revolution of Flags, because, you know, they always have to have a name, where once again people gathered to try to overthrow the ruling Georgia Dream Party. Now, that was triggered by widespread accusations that the previous parliamentary election had been rigged. I'll be kind, okay, and say that the evidence that I've seen based on polling and individual constituency results is tenuous, to be kind. But that's the way it is. I mean, ultimately, this was triggered. This dissatisfaction with the election result was triggered because it went against what European and American leaders wanted. And it went against them because the Georgia Dream Party had the temerity to pass a law that demanded that NGOs that get a certain percentage of their funding from abroad disclose that fact. I mean, personally, as a Briton, I would like to know if charities that are lobbying government and are active in civil society are getting funding from, I don't know, Saudi Arabia or Russia or China or Brussels, for example. Like, I would like to know that. I think it's reasonable to ask. But it's caused a long colour revolution, and it simply hasn't worked. The Georgia government was aware of the tricks, it seemed. They knew the playbook. They knew how to avoid mistakes, and it has failed. Moldova is a different case because Moldova was successfully colour revolutioned long ago, and it's managed to hold on to that, unlike Georgia, who has gone from the colour revolution government to something more neutral, or that attempted to be neutral. That's apparently forbidden. But in Moldova, the colour revolution held. Recently, though, that's really been under strain. And the reason is that Moldova relied on Russia for 100% of its gas, and it got most of its electricity from the pro-Russian breakaway region of Transnistria. So when the war in Ukraine broke out, it was faced with a choice. Continue to have good relations with Russia, continue to get your gas and your electricity, continue to be able to roll over your massive debts to Gazprom, or follow the pro-Western route and don't have that. So, of course, they went the pro-Western route because that's what, these pro-Western leaders are put in place to do. That's what they believe in. And this was a bit of an economic catastrophe. I mean, the price increase was so big, the price increase for energy, I should say, was so big after they started buying from Romania and the EU more broadly, that it was the equivalent of 13% of GDP. The price increase alone equaled 25% of goods imports. Obviously, this had a terrible effect on the Moldovan economy. I think inflation was 34% or more one year. Like, the economy declined by 6% or something like that in one. I mean, like, it was bad, really bad. So these elections were going to be important. They were going to be a key battle. Like, can the colour revolution from the past hold? Can this stay a pro-Western country, even despite this? And really, a lot of pressure was put on the Moldovan leader, Maia Sandu. She really made an effort to suppress opposition parties. She arrested some of their leaders. She was accused of denying them equal media access. Some anti-government media stations were shut down altogether. She changed local election laws that in a way that favoured her PAS party. And there was even talk that during the elections, the Moldovan diaspora in Europe were provided really plentiful access to voting booths and ballots. You know, every major city had one essentially for the Moldovan diaspora, whereas in Russia, which has the largest Moldovan diaspora, I think there were like 2 ballot boxes in the whole country, and there was insufficient ballot papers sent. This was an accusation. But anyway, Sandu's PAS party managed to gain a standalone majority in parliament, and Sandu won her EU accession referendum. So Moldova was a hold for the West. In Romania, the steel was even more real, I think we can say. The presidential election was just cancelled. When a populist candidate, Calin Georgescu, looked like he was going to win, he was kind of standard populist, but quite a thoughtful guy, actually, in his own way. NATO skeptical, EU skeptic, more on the Orban-Fico side when it came to the Ukraine war. And when it looked like he was going to win, they just cancelled the election. The intelligence agents came up with some unsubstantiated, really flimsy evidence of suspicious activity on TikTok that they said was related to Russia. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, good enough for us, we'll cancel this election. And then in the rerun, they put a real kind of foaming at the mouth, you know, like Tommy Robinson, Nick Fuentes sort of character up against the establishment candidate who probably won. So there was protest, but, you know, everyone forgot about that. It was cheered by the West. It was a great victory for democracy. So Romania was also a kind of Western establishment hold. And then, of course, we had the new breed of more violent, nihilistic Gen Z colour revolutions. In Nepal and Madagascar, they both started, one about banning social media in Nepal, one about power cuts in Madagascar, but then they kind of metastasized into real nasty, broader range of grievances, against the ruling elite, and they became very violent. I think almost 100 people died in Nepal, and there were a couple of thousand wounded. It was bad stuff. And again in Madagascar, the president was pretty much driven out of office after the army changed sides and undertook a proper coup d'état. And finally, there was Mexico, which seemed more like an opening shot. But in Nepal and Madagascar, both became more pro-Western. Are they gains? Are they geostrategically important? I don't know. Mexico was a failure, but again, it's an opening shot. So let's have a think about this. Like, let's rewind. Why were colour revolutions successful in the first place? Like, I don't want to disagree with the work of Mike Benz, because I genuinely think that that's remarkable stuff. He's really blown the lid off, the whole USA, National Endowment for Democracy, NGO complex, basically, and how they manufacture narrative and how they can pressure foreign governments. It's incredibly important work. But I will say this, they were pushing at an open door. They had a really captive audience. Why do I say that? Well, look, anybody who spent any time traveling in Eastern Europe in the early and mid 2000s knows that all of the upwardly mobile people dreamt of working in the West, going to the West, or being westernized. So like, you know, like the top dogs, the people in business, and especially the people in politics, you know, they come from this, I don't know, imagine it. You're in a dour, economically backward communist nation or former communist nation. You've escaped that. You've thrown off the yoke. Well done. You've maybe suffered a couple of economic crises in the meantime. Well, what next? Well, you know, you're part of the economic and political elite. You would like to be part of the Western economic and political elite, like these people who you admire, these people who you look up to, these people who run countries that are, you know, are your ideal, your inspiration. Like, you want to be able to drink a flute of champagne in the chattering class salons or the cocktail parties or the embassy receptions in London and Paris and Washington as an equal member of that crowd. And then maybe after you retire, you would maybe like to get, you know, be respected enough to get some speaking engagements or some book deals, like to talk about how you transformed the Baltic nation into the first internet society, or how you revolutionized healthcare in Ukraine. I don't know. Or maybe you get like a sweet gig with the Tony Blair Institute or the Open Society Foundations, and you become rich enough to like have your shirts made by Turnbull and Asser on German Street rather than big clothes factory outside Minsk. Okay, like that's the dream. That's your aspiration. Lower down the chain, if you're young, you also dream of making it in the West. You know, you want to be paid Western wages, have Western opportunities, have Western middle class lifestyle. Like, you dream of that. Like, at the very least, it would be nice to have, you know, visa-free travel to Europe. It's a pain in the backside to have to apply for visas. It's like expensive. It involves traveling, loads of documentation. It means you can get rejected and not be able to go on holiday where you want. It's a pain in the derriere. Like, you would rather be able to visit Paris or London or Florence, or like, I don't know, have your summer holiday in Ibiza rather than on the Black Sea coast. Okay, like that's what you want to do. And then there's also, like, back then there was also this seductiveness of Western liberalism, Western social liberalism. We shouldn't forget that in addition to being former communist countries, Eastern Europe and much of Asia as well, is also socially pretty conservative. And if you're a young person, this idea to go to the West, at like a free city like Amsterdam or London or Paris, wow, amazing. Like, you can throw off all of that, you know, responsibility to others and the expectations of others and the desires of your community and society. And you can be free to do what you want to do and achieve what you want to achieve and be the person you want to achieve. At the very least, that sounded like a really interesting template to bring to your country. It was exciting. Okay, so what's happening now? Well, first of all, economically, the West is nowhere near as dominant as it was. Put it this way: how many Poles are now coming to Britain? And if they are, will they come any longer? It's like, and there are alternative models as well. Like, some developing nations are now looking toward China. So you've got like a narrowed gap between, you know, these formerly emerging economies in the West, and at the same time, you've got alternative models. So the West doesn't have that as much of an economic drawing. It's still big, but it's not as much as it was anymore. Secondly, you know, like a lot of the rest of the world, if you actually speak to people, they have the internet. They're not stupid. They think Western liberalism's gone a bit mental. Like if you go to a bar in like Asia or in Eastern Europe or the Balkans, for example, and you sit in Belgrade and you chat to some of these professionals or, you know, politicians or whatever, you know, it won't be long to before they quite sheepishly, nervously ask, in case they're going to offend you, like, is it true what we've been reading about 8-year-olds being given puberty blockers? Or is it true what we've been reading about, like, men are now allowed to use women's toilets, like natal men, or like, you know, natal men are now allowed to enter women's swimming races. Is that true? Is it true that, like, these migrants who, like, raped 6 underage girls can't be deported for some human rights law? Like, really, is that true? Like, they can't believe it. They think we've gone a bit mad. So I don't think the liberal model seems as attractive as it was anymore. And I think the first point is, as I've mentioned, we're becoming more authoritarian. That's both ourselves It's obvious there's attacks on free speech in the UK and in Europe, and the right of association. There are attacks on media and so on and so forth. But there's also, like, as I said before, as we try to cement the gains in places like Romania and Moldova and also Ukraine, by the way, the methods that we're using are not this kind of democratic dream anymore. They're not about freedom anymore. It's quite like old school, like the stuff that they all escaped from between 1989 and 1992. It looks like it's coming back. Now, okay, maybe you could argue that's about stopping Russia, right? I mean, fine. Okay. I mean, maybe that's a valid argument, but that's not democracy, is it? It's not freedom, is it? Like, it's quite authoritarian tactics. And I think some of these populations are becoming very cynical about it, like very cynical. You can see in the third world and the way that none of the third world nations have joined the Western alliance on Ukraine. Like, they see right through the hypocrisy now. And I think this discredits us quite a lot. Like, when people look at what's happened in Romania, okay, Romania might not be a big deal, or Moldova might not be a big deal, or Georgia might not be a big deal. But like, cumulatively, when these things quite happen, it causes cynicism about this whole thing. So all of these things, like the economic gap reducing, the fading allure of the Western brand of liberalism, the cynical, illiberal, anti-democratic tactics that we're now using, they all mount up to mean that we simply don't have the really thirsty audience that we used to have. And I think that's especially going to be the case if the new model is just going to be like this Gen Z model where it's like, okay, the protests aren't working, we're going to go violent like that, like at the snap of our fingers, and it's going to be just a violent mob. But then a colour revolution is not a colour revolution. It's not lovely fireworks anymore. It's a baseball bat and a mob. I think the fireworks are going to stop making us smile, and I think 2025 is going to go down as the year when that happened.
Ho, 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 ho. Merry Christmas.